Hello, everyone. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited that you're joining us for this discussion. Everyone who's joining in, thank you for joining us. We are going to start in just a minute. Hello, Beatrice from Indonesia, and Mirjami. Thanks for waiting. Hello from Greece, from Brazil. So excited. Just one moment. Okay, and we're on. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who made time to be a part of this conversation. We are a group of African women from all over the place, and we've come together with the Coalition of African Lesbians to discuss well-being and LGBTQIA+ and feminist activism, and thinking about what that looks like, generally speaking, but also how it has been affected by the pandemic and how our lives have been affected by the pandemic in relation to our work. So first, before we start, just some housekeeping. Welcome again to this exciting session at the Global Youth Summit at large. Some of you are joining us through the Juno platform. Welcome to all of you. And many of you might be joining us on YouTube Live through the live broadcast and through other social media platforms. A warm welcome to every one of you. Please, before we kick off, please note that this session is part of the Global Youth Summit. We strongly encourage you all to explore all other sessions in any of the 3 tracks of each day of the summit, which ends tomorrow. By joining this session, everyone who will have the opportunity to speak is consenting to their image and audio being broadcast. By participating at the Global Youth Summit, you also have agreed to behave professionally, respectfully, to be culturally sensitive towards other people, to promote the principles of respect, diversity, and inclusion, as well as to actively prevent and not engage in abusive behavior of any kind that leads to any harm, prejudice, discrimination, or harassment against any person. If you do not adhere to these principles or Summit's code of conduct, you will be removed from the session and potentially banned from the entire event altogether. And the organization that nominated you to participate, that is if you're on the Juno platform, will be notified of your action. Fourthly, we have a safeguarding team that is moderating our interaction on the Juno platform, the live broadcast chat function, and all social media channels. Should you at any point as a participant feel unsafe, either on either platforms, please reach out by sending an email to safe@globalyouthmobilization.org. That's SAFE@globalyouthmobilization.org. You may also get in touch with our support team at the virtual help desk if you're on the Juno platform. All information emailed to the email address will be kept private and confidential. And now that housekeeping is out of the way, let's start. Just a sort of note for our viewers on YouTube and social media, you can follow the conversation, particularly on YouTube, you can follow the conversation using live captions, which are in French, Spanish, Arabic, and Russian. I'm so excited. So I can't even tell you, this has been a long time coming for us, and Tiffany, Jennifer, Eunice, and Mino are just as excited as I am. So I would like to introduce you all to them first and foremost. I'll introduce Jennifer. Jennifer is a business process analyst and entrepreneur, and she's also the founder and executive director of One Action Foundation in Nigeria. She's very passionate about improving the well-being of LGBTQI plus individuals in Nigeria. And that's why she started the organization, because she wanted to advocate for LGBTQI plus youth rights. And most recently, through the support of funding for One Action Foundation, she was able to provide lots of COVID-19 essentials to 133 LGBTQ plus youth. And she did lots of social justice awareness for the LGBTQ plus community in Nigeria. And she continues to make an impact with all the skills she has acquired over time. Welcome, Janice. Jennifer, you can wave at the audience just so they know who you are.
Thanks for having me.
Then we have Eunice Ishimwe. Eunice is an independent researcher in development economics, and she focuses on gender equality, inclusion, macroeconomics, program design, and evaluation. She has worked in Rwanda, Kigali with several groups, and most recently, she was working together with the she was working with a collective, a feminist collective in Rwanda that established the first all-Black women library. She also supports the Knitting Sisters, which is an NGO focused on supporting teen moms in Kigali. Wait, hi Eunice. Then we have Mino, also Nalumino Likwasi, who is the founder and programs and operations manager at Women's Alliance for Equality, which is an LGBTQ specifically focused NGO in Zambia, where she works on sexual and reproductive health rights, mental health and well-being, and economic strengthening for LGBTQ persons. She has worked for HIVOS and with HIVOS with FHI 360 on LGBTIQ and key population service delivery programs for several. She currently is on the board of trustees of the Other Foundation, the board of directors of the African Queer Youth Initiative, and the board of Pepeta Zambia, which is a national grouping of Zambian feminists. Last but not least, we have Tiffany Kagure Mugo, who is the co-founder and curator of Hola Africa, which is a Pan-Africanist hub that chronicles and provides information about sex and sexuality in the African context. Okay, she's a columnist, podcast host of Basically Life, and author of the book Quirky Quick Guide to Having Great Sex. Look it up. Okay. Wave. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for joining us. And thanks to all the panelists for joining us. So to kick this discussion off, first and foremost, I would like for the panelists to just share a little bit about how you're doing in this pandemic. How are you doing? How are you feeling in the context of your life, but also your life in the context of your work? Jennifer?
Okay, hi everyone. First of all, I'll just say I'm happy to be here and looking forward to how the session ends and how the session goes on to the end. So when I don't even know where to start from. If I'm thinking about how I'm doing or how I have been doing for the last 1 year plus, I would say that just like everybody else, adjusting to this new normal has been really difficult. Having to work from home, not being able to live your social life the normal way you would, just even basically trying to move around and being social has been very difficult. So for myself and my teammates, it's just what we just do is constant checkup, trying to be sure that everyone is fine and we're all doing well. And when I think about our work, what we've been doing so far, like if I think about the lives of LGBTQI in Nigeria, I would say that our experiences when it comes to how the pandemic has affected us has been different. Because, first of all, Nigeria, we're already a vulnerable, marginalized group. And then people are being affected in various forms. Some people are being affected either economically or being affected when you think about their mental health and their well being. And one of the things we did in one when the pandemic just started, what we did was we carried out a survey just to understand people's well-being, basically majorly LGBTQI well-being, and we had a tremendous response. We had over 300 people who had responded to the survey. And I know that if I recall very correctly from the results, we had about 97% of people who had stated that their lives were being, like daily activities that they would normally do, were being affected. And this was coming from the fact that they, so many things had changed in their lives, things like their daily income activities, some people having to isolate with family members that are homophobic. So for us, this is really difficult. And if you think about it, you automatically understand that this would obviously affect their mental health. And the difficulties that we've had so far is trying to get professionals who could help them in safe spaces. And also, even we still conducted this survey just to understand people's mental health well-being. This was 6 months after the pandemic had struck in Nigeria, and we still had responses where people had said, we had like almost 18% of people who had said they had attempted suicide. We had over 50% of people who had stated that they were rendered homeless during this period. So it's been like a fire brigade approach when it comes to helping them out, trying to link up with other NGOs and allies that could also help people that have been at risk, providing safe housing. So I would just say, like, in general, it's been difficult. And the fact that we in Nigeria were not being recognized in the public eye says a lot and speaks volume as to how our lives don't matter. So hopefully in time things changes. So that's where I would say we are at the moment.
Thanks for sharing, Jennifer. I think because of the fact that things were so difficult and the fact that you, together with your organization, took it upon you to provide some essential services and essential materials for particularly LGBTQIA plus community. I don't imagine that you reached as many people as you possibly could have, but I know that that's I know that that's one step towards the right direction, and a very useful thing to just extend that hand and help. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
Tiffany, could you share how things have been like for you?
So one of the things I know I'm very lucky with is that I get to isolate with my partner, who's also kind of my best friend. So we've done really weird stuff like make forts and make random cocktails of things we find in the house. But like the way Jennifer said, it has been weird to adjust to the new normal. But I think with us, one of the things that, again, we're very lucky with is a lot of our work is digitally based. So there wasn't that mega shift in terms of the work that we do, because with Holla Africa, we're just doing the well, not just, but we're doing the Instagram, we're producing podcasts, we're just producing all of this digital content. And we found that people engaged a lot more. Like, people already engaged like a lot, but they engaged a lot more because people are isolated, they just needed that space. And because a lot of physical spaces were taken away, they shifted to the digital space. Yeah, it's just been generally quite weird. A lot of our physical projects that we wanted to do, so we wanted to make a documentary, and we were going to go to Nigeria, and we were going to go to Ghana, and we were going to go to Uganda. We were going to just like mess it up, right? Then obviously, without being able to travel, a lot of that was put on hold. So with us, it was just a case of like pivoting and figuring out what else to do, to make sure that we constantly produce content, because a lot of our work, like, and God bless like the work like Jennifer and Mino and everyone else does, a lot of our work is very like sunshine and roses. We're like the sorority girls of the LGBTQ space. We just come in and we're like, hi, do you want to see this nude on Instagram? And then do you want to see this TikTok? Oh my gosh. So it's been a case of like pivoting that. So a lot of our work has shifted. So we decided this year we're going to produce a book of essays around sex and sexuality and just have people write about the sex they're having or not having. We're doing a mini series and just it's just a case of content and constantly making sure that that digital space is there. We started posting a lot more because people have a lot more time on their hands, and it's just been a very, very heavy time and a very weird time. So we've tried, like in the work that like Holla does, we tried to like just still bring that lightness and still bring somewhere where you can come and you can see a funny meme or see a funny TikTok, or, you know, we just had Freaky Friday and Instagram keep threatening to take us off the platform, but it's fine. Yeah, so that's just basically been like our experience of the whole thing.
Thanks for sharing that, Tiff, and thanks for being the sorority girls that we need, because we do come to you for a lot of these very exciting things you do. But I'm also very curious to, you know, hear later on how else that has affected your approach to the work you do at Holla and the podcasting and all the media stuff. Particularly because you've also mentioned that people have a lot more time on their hands. So what does that also look like for how people are engaging with the work that you do, considering that it's also a really difficult time? So I look forward to hearing a little bit more about that later. Thanks for sharing. Eunice, could you just share with us what the experience has been like for you and in your work as well?
Thanks. That you can hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. So last when the pandemic hit Rwanda, I was working with Sister Circle Collective, and what Sister Circle Collective did at the time is provide safe spaces for girls and teenagers, and sometimes up to 20, 30 years old, would hold panels to discuss different topics like mental health, LGBTQ problematics, or sexual reproductive rights, things like that. And we had the library. But now when the pandemic hit, the library couldn't function anymore because people couldn't come get books, and we couldn't give them books either. We couldn't hold what we call the intimate circle with, let's say, 20 girls or so. So basically everything had to come to a halt, and we had to re-strategize. Now, how do we reach people? How do we get to people? And we started like using Instagram and having Instagram Live. And yeah, so now how we coped, I don't really, it was vibes. It was really vibes. You'd wake up and figure it out, like how you're going to cope for the day. But personally, meditation helped, journaling, walks, things like that, you know, finding a way to find purpose and apply self-preservation, because I feel like on the top, we don't stress self-preservation enough. We talk about self-care, self-love, but self-preservation is what makes it sustainable. So I had to kind of redefine that for myself. And during the pandemic, a little bit after, let's say around August, September, that's when I left Sister Circle. So I had to kind of find new ways now to continue doing the work, but individually. And that's been through research, through educating myself, enrolling in different courses around gender and leadership or research. And I started doing more research work and individually as well. So yeah.
I'm sad to hear that the effects of on the library were that people now can come, you know, and enjoy that space that they have had in the past together, because that sounds like such an amazing project. It reminds me also of there's a certain type of library as well of the same type in Namibia, also named Sister something. So, you know, that whole concept is a wonderful concept, and to have that disrupted means that, you know, the community is disrupted, and the way that you take care of yourselves and take care of each other is also disrupted. So it just throws things all out of whack. Thanks for sharing that, Eunice. And Mino, could you share with us what things have been like for you in Zambia?
Okay, sure. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So first of all, I think I relate with many of the things that my fellow panelists have said. And shout out to Tiff. Hola has definitely kept me very entertained and all this craziness. I mean, it's been a time that's been quite stressful. I think a lot of anxiety, and mostly because it's just been a period that we have never been in before. So then there's all this uncertainty around what's tomorrow looking like, who's going to be affected, am I going to be affected by this, my immediate family? And I think kind of all that worrying. So I think it also has translated to the team and how we work, and kind of seeing how, especially the mental side of things, like Jennifer was mentioning. So I think it's been a difficult time. We did try to do a little bit of work around supporting our community with supplies, foodstuffs and whatnot, but I think what we're trying to plan around is how do we do this in a way that's sustainable? We can't give people a little care pack that's going to be done maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But then after that, what happens? So trying to look around, how do we kind of do this in a way that's more sustainable for our community? But I think this period for me also has forced me to kind of put in a lot of work with self-care. I think I might be a workaholic. My mind is not at peace when it's still. But then finding myself in this situation kind of forced me to prioritize my own self-care and to kind of take things a little bit slower and make sure I'm actually okay to be doing this work, because it's a lot and it takes a toll over time. And I think that's something that a lot of activists need to actually start prioritizing, taking things easy and taking care of ourselves, because if we're not okay, then how are we going to be doing the work that we want to be doing for our communities? So I think it's been that negative side, but then the positive side has also been this realization that we need to take better care of ourselves, whatever that looks like for each person. Yeah.
Thanks, Mino, for sharing that. And I think it also speaks to what Eunice talked about with regards to now being forced to have to take it a day at a time, in terms of figuring out what comes next, how am I going to feel tomorrow, etc. I just realized now that I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Verianne Sika. I work at the Coalition of African Lesbians, which is based in Johannesburg. I'm the research manager at CAL. I will call the Coalition of African Lesbians CAL. And for those joining us, you please feel free to have a look on later on the partner at our partner page to share a bit more about this. The reason why we're interested in having this conversation with regards to well-being, I'm not sure whether you can you still hear me and see me? I'm just getting a notification. Okay. The reason we're particularly interested in having this conversation is because we recently started taking quite seriously our work on well-being in feminist activism, in LGBTQIA plus activism as well. This sort of comes from a history of having conducted a pre-conference at the Changing Faces, Changing Spaces conference that was held in 2017 by UHAI. That's UHAI. They often hold these conferences rather every few years. And in 2017, we had a pre-conference at one of those conferences that they hold. And at that conference, we brought together between 30 and 40 women from all over Africa, from South and East, West and Central, and some from Northern Africa, to talk about the things that their priorities for the things that they and the things that they're interested in pursuing within their gender and sexual rights activism, generally speaking. And one of the things that was talked about quite a lot was the interest in doing more well-being work, investing a bit more on well-being, as opposed to just having like a yoga session slotted in at conferences here and there, but like actually putting our mouths, is it our money or our mouths? Putting our money where our mouth is, and actually investing in doing work around well-being. And so Cal has particularly taken that seriously. If you want to read more about what other things were said and decided upon at that pre-conference, please visit the Cal website and just have a look at the LBQ manifesto. So that's why Cal is particularly interested in having more and more conversations about well-being. We are also in the process of finalizing a research project, which is on well-being in feminist activism in Africa. And we'll be sharing that with anyone who's interested, but also stay tuned on our website and sign up for newsletters to get informed when that's ready. So before we go forward with the next question, I would just like to ask that the panelists also share a little bit about the work that they're doing with regards to well-being, and if you just want to share a little bit about the type of work you do before we actually delve into, I know Tiffany, for example, you've already talked about that, so no need to do that. But if you would like to talk a little bit more about the work that you do, so that for the audience that's listening, they can put your responses in context of the work that you're doing, before we go to our second question. I'll start with Vino.
So I think the mental health and wellness theme in our programs is something that I think we started kind of prioritizing. Prior to that, a lot of our work was very SRHR driven, and because, well, donors say money is for SRHR. I think a lot of people were not wanting to spend money on wellness or well-being because it didn't seem like something important. But I think that's something that we've started to prioritize in our work. And one way that we've been doing that is I got this idea from a very, very brilliant friend of mine from Nigeria, kind of having the LBQ conversations. I think in a lot of work that we do, you have tables and projectors and facilitators, and it's all very formal. So this idea came, and it's just bringing together women. Just have your chairs, if you have a little bit of wine or some juice or whatever, and just let people have honest conversation about whatever it is that's the topic for that time. So what we were doing was each month we would have one of these conversations, and it would have a theme. The 1 month we would talk about loneliness, the next month we'll talk about pleasure, and just kind of have people have the space to have some of these conversations very honestly, in a very open space, judgment-free. And I think it's something that became quite popular even amongst our beneficiaries. And I think most people prefer that to actually coming to a workshop or a training, because that's just very formal. It's exhausting, really. Workshops, I'm tired of trainings. But I think also trying to do some support groups. These had to be done virtually because COVID and the regulations that were kind of on and off. So they were happening kind of on WhatsApp. You have the group where people kind of discuss the issues, And that's a program that we had been invited to collaborate with Walk With Me Foundation. That's an institution that solely focuses on mental health issues. So the time frame that we had for the initial support groups and to see how this kind of goes, take the lessons from it and see how we build up on it. So we got done with that first round of it, and we're just hoping to revamp that and then have more people join these support groups if they need to, especially that people came and expressed a lot of difficulties with depression, with stress, with during the pandemic. But then also, I think pride is something that's been big for us, and it was very unfortunate that we couldn't do it last year. So the last 2 years, we held the first ever pride events in Lusaka. And the first one was very small. I think people were trying to fill it out and see, is it going to be safe? Will people get arrested and things like that? So we had like 40 people at the first one. And the second one that we had in 2019, we had, I think, between 150 and 170 people. So I think the word got around from the first one that it was okay. People found this to be a safe space. And so that's something that we're trying to make sure happens every year. I think we're kind of learning how to manage in the pandemic now. So we're actually in the process of planning this year's event. We're just doing that now. So I think that's kind of the ways that we around the well-being and wellness here. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for sharing that. I know particularly Zambia is not necessarily the easiest place to do the work that you do. So thanks for sharing that. And speaking of other places that aren't easy, I think apart from South Africa, most African countries are quite difficult to work, in the work that we do around gender and sexual rights. Jennifer, you talked about providing some COVID-19 essentials and care packages. Could you just share a little bit more about other work that you do as at One Action Foundation?
Okay, so aside from the essential materials to LGBTQI individuals, prior to the pandemic, one of the things we do, we take mental health very seriously. So like Mino had mentioned, we usually have like a mini workshop program where we have LGBTQI individuals coming together, and then we share, we pick it in a topic, we have a conversation on it. It could be maybe about self-love, self-care. And that was something we had started in December 2019. And then the pandemic happened. So we couldn't really do a lot again when it came to using like physical spaces. So we just leveraged using social media platform. And what we do is we've done about 2 sessions now where we have conversations that's probably surrounded about suicide prevention. If you go on our page on social media, we put out a lot of information that has to do with anxiety, depression, more like a mini mental health toolkit for people to get informed. And luckily last year we had the first virtual pride called Nganga, which is Pride in Igbo language in Nigeria. And I wasn't expecting people to log in, to be honest, because I thought people were going to get scared. And luckily we had over like 80 participants. We had like a program where we had different activities, from speaking to therapists to having couples discuss on how they've coped during the pandemic. And now we're going to make that a yearly event, which will be held every month, every June, which is the month of Pride. So for us, we've just been basically looking for ways to, push information out there that has to do with mental health and well-being. And recently, like I mentioned earlier, we did do a survey just to understand the needs that people require, and we've applied for various funds. The plan is to link those who need help with professionals, and provide like 5 sessions for them for a period of 6 to 12 weeks. So hopefully if we get that funding, then I would say that would be a huge kickstart in terms of helping people when it comes to their mental health and well-being. So basically that's all we've been doing, pushing out so much information on social media, trying to reach out to people as much as possible, and we're linking them up with various therapists, free consultation, free therapists, as much as we can. It's very difficult, but we're trying the best that we can do at the moment. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I will just go ahead and ask, next question, which is really a big question to our panelists. It involves a lot of several different elements to your response. And that is, some of the things that Mino and Jennifer already started talking about, and Tiffany already also mentioned, and Eunice, you talked about a little bit as well before. And these are thinking about the strategies that you have used in the past in your work that have proved to be successful in your organizing, in your activism, during and also before the pandemic, that you would like to share particularly with anyone else who might be interested in doing the work that you're doing on gender and sexual rights. The strategies that you pick doesn't have to be the most elaborate thing. It could be as simple as possible, but something that you particularly feel, is a go-to strategy for getting the success that you need for your work. I will keep it to one strategy for now, but if you feel like you have 10, we can come back later. So I'll start with Tiffany for this one. Share with us what some of those strategies have been like. Well, one of those strategies.
So for us, collaboration is a really organizations, like different organizations. So we love squad goals. We just love it. Like every project that we do, we always make sure that there's a whole bunch of partners involved, that we're not the only people. Currently, the book that we is a collaboration between us and another South African organization called Fem Project. Even with that, we have like contributors from all over, right? I think we've got people from Zambia, we've got people from Swaziland, like different places, Kenya, Uganda, like all. One of the big things has always been collaboration. It's kind of like the bread and butter of Holla, because we can't do this alone. And also because we're digital and we want to do work across different contexts and countries and stuff, we always people, and it's always fun because you get to meet new people. Yay. So yeah, that's one of our really big strategies. It's just making sure that we've got a squad, making sure that we tap into our networks, making sure we support our networks as well. So say somebody has an event, that's been a big thing for us. As more and more people are coming to the digital space, and because we've been on the digital space a long time, they come and they're like, hey, can you share our event? Or can you pop into our summit? Or can you do this? Can you do that? And it's been our whole thing, just being like, okay, cool, we'll show up for you. We'll do a thing, anything you want digitally, we can collaborate on that. So yeah, collaboration.
Thanks, Tiff. I also am a huge fan of collaboration because this panel is also about collaboration. I particularly enjoy the types of content that is put out by bringing together different voices and bits and pieces that is collected from other people, because then it's this varied piece of resource that can be used by as varied group of people as the people who contribute to it. So thanks for sharing that. Eunice, could you please share with us some of the tried and true strategies that you have used in the past in your work, even now?
So what we used before COVID, but mostly during the pandemic, was to do three things. So the first thing was to first identify the needs, because before you design a program, you need to know what are the needs on the ground, and followed by our own capacity. What are we able to do? And lastly, pretty much to have a variety of how to say this way, offering. So let's say, since we had to move the intimate circle, which is the safe space, how do we then do that, and what kind of content we provide, and to be able to provide a variety of options? We're going to discuss things. We're not just going to discuss feminist theory because we have a library. We're going to also try and have that. I think the DJ come over to do like a session with just African women. There was conversation on funding and how that's going to affect our work, conversation on feminist theory, conversation on sister outsider. There was reading as well. So just identifying the different cohorts, the groups that we want to reach, what do we add that is tailored to them and keeps our work going. And also what we need to work on personally, because there's a certain capacity that we have, but given circumstances, then how do we equip ourselves with tools to be able to continue working, but in a different setting? So being it taking a course so that you can be able to have a better conversation online, being it raising money through a mobile app, and being one in terms of collaboration that they can buy, let's say, groceries or necessities for the LGBTQ community that we can't reach because our lockdown was so strict. You couldn't even get out of the house. You couldn't even take out of your compound. So trying to find different things that we can do in that circumstances, that's what we try to do.
Thanks for sharing that, Eunice. Jennifer, is there anything that you would like to add? Because you've talked about quite a few strategies that you rely on for your activism already. But is there, I suppose, like a go-to one you recommend that other people also consider using in their gender and sexual rights activism and organizing?
I would say for me, aside from using the social media platform for advocacy, one of the things that we do, like Eunice had mentioned, is we're very big on doing survey, because that's the only way of channel our projects or programs or what we need to do. So I feel that carrying out surveys is very important. So we do that a lot. We try to understand where everyone's mindset is at the moment, because it's more or less like a way of appreciating the work that we do. And then also very big on partnership, because One Action Foundation is a really small organization. And prior to the pandemic, everything in our office has been online. We've always used the digital space. So we're very big on partnership. I know that we've done some work with Tiffany, and we've also tried to reach out to other organizations as well. So for us, partnership is very huge, and also using the social media platform and survey is really, really big for us. I think that that's one of the ways that we can then start using in terms of the movement and the works that we do.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you and Tiffany are singing the same song, and you and Eunice also speak the same language in terms of getting a sense of what people actually want, so that whatever you're doing makes sense to them, because you do work with them at the end of the day. Mino, could you share with us your go-to strategy in your organizing work? Thank you.
I think great points that everyone has raised so far. But I think also something that has worked quite well for us is kind of social media mobilization. Like Jennifer said, our organization is also pretty small, and like digital organizing is not our strongest area. But the sole reason why we were formed was because we noticed within the broader LGBT movement, whether there's activities happening or meetings, there would be like 50 gay men and then like 2 lesbian women, 1 bisexual person. I was like, is it just us? Where's everybody else? And that's the biggest reason why our organization was formed. But then it was also like, so I know 2 people, but then how many other people are there? So I think social media for us really worked so well because we started with the people that we know in our own circles, and then they bring the people that they know. And now it's something that we'll say, like, we know that we have people, at least in each of the provinces that we have in our country, resources being provided. We were able to provide services there as well, as opposed to going in blind. You go into a place, you don't have any contact persons there, any person to help you do the groundwork. So I think using social media for mobilization and using social networks, and I think the biggest part of that has also been ensuring that you provide security, because social media is very, I think, risky. And a lot of people, visibility, I think for the LGBTQ women that we do work with, I think visibility was always an issue of, I'm afraid to be seen because all these reasons, right? Look at our context. So I think trying to ensure that while we provide that platform for people to be able to engage with each other online, it's also what kind of security are we providing around those kinds of platforms. But it's been a little bit difficult because I think very recently, if anybody follows the news in Zambia, the government newspapers ran a series of articles about funding that's coming from the other foundation and how it's promoting gay whatevers. So then because of that, there's always the risk. So then you might have to shut down your social media pages for a little bit, and then when you come back, you have to start again, which is like you lose the momentum, because then you have to start your page, get the 1 like, the 2, and then, so that's been a bit of a challenge, but it's something that has worked pretty well also. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Mino. I think before we proceed to exploring a different area, subtopic of this broad topic, I would like to just pose some questions that have been shared here. One of the questions that has been asked is, what would you like LGBT plus youth to know about the future and how they can help with jobs and society? I suppose I think I understand the question, but I'm not sure whether how they can help with jobs and society means that how youth can help or how the panelists can help. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but is there anyone who would like to take this question or any part of that question? Particularly also, I'm interested in hearing what you would like LGBT youth to know about the future. Let's go, Tiffany, and then go ahead, Tiffany.
So one of the things that I've been seeing, like the maneuvering of the online space. Obviously, this is for people who do have access. The maneuvering of the online space to do new and innovative things. I've seen a lot of people start small businesses on using the online space because now you have access to a much bigger market than you would have traditionally. I've also seen people not really also using the online space, but like really digging into the different you can have an income. So to go back to the idea of different small businesses, than we have before, where we're just told, oh, you must be a lawyer, or you must be a doctor, or you must be a this, that, and just realizing that there is such a spectrum of things to do, be it in a collaborative effort, be it individually, and I think that's just something that, as Holla, we've seen more. A few years back, we released manual, and this had also come doing digital marketing trainings, and we found some people like who would come to the training for the digital age, right? So like being a social media marketer or producing content that is specifically for the online. I know I'm always the person who's always like, use the online space, but seriously, use the online space. And as more and more things have gone digital, it's like there's just like this whole economy and this whole job market that is opening up more and more. You have people who traditionally you would have had like a communications person, but now you can have somebody literally entire job is to create content and to curate content for people's online space. So you don't even need like a whole big thing ever. So I think that is just like a powerful, which is difficult because now we're bogged down in anxiety, but to just look at the sort of broader spectrum of jobs that are out there.
Steph. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tiffany. Like for action, one of the things we do is we try to provide social economic support. And I'm very, very big on, people being entrepreneurial, very, very big on it. So I'm always the person who says if you have any skill that you can harness, it's very important that you work on it. So we try to, like, I know for this year, one of the biggest plans that we have is vocational training, and it's not necessarily focused on the traditional jobs where people talk about medicine or engineering, or it's things like even if it's just you having a spa, being working in beauty, it could be social media, it could be anything. I'm really, really big on that. And I also feel I've seen how like the LGBTQI Nigerian youth are taking up spaces on social media. They're very fearless when it comes to amplifying their voices. So for me, that's something that I find very interesting. And one of the things the spaces we also try to use when it comes to amplifying youth voices is Clubhouse as well. I don't know if anyone is very active on Clubhouse. So there are like 2 or 3 rooms that are centered on queer Nigerians, and that room has created opportunities for entrepreneurs. We just ended the apprentice show, because we did the apprentice show. So we just ended the apprentice show where we were able to fund someone's business. So I think that right now we are now trying to occupy spaces and understanding that we need to empower each other. So I think that in the future, the youth, they are taking up the spaces. No one is scared again like before, where everyone's like hiding their faces, and then no one cares, to be honest. If you look at the NSAS protest that happened in Nigeria, how everyone was very vocal about, their opinion and their voices. So I think in the nearest future, there's hope, there's dream, there are opportunities for LGBTQI youths, and it's just a matter of time. So that's my take on it.
Thanks for sharing that hopeful message, Jennifer. Eunice, I believe you also had wanted to respond to this question. Okay, go ahead.
So yeah, because it's a topic of interest for me, but beyond creating like a cooperative or a group that works together, I think the youth also needs to think long term, and part of it is to formalize the business only so as to get pension or social security, or be able to access bank account, be able to ask for loans, things like that. So it's necessary to think about that beyond the singular income that you make and beyond the saving group, because oftentimes we make an income, but then at the end of the month you spend it all and then it's all gone, when you have to think long term. So it's important for the LGBTQ youth to think long term and sustainability beyond just the now. Let's put ourselves together, but let's be smart about the way we structure ourselves and the way we structure this income generation, and how to build it into wealth, actually, beyond just survival. So to me, that's what's important to think about in the way that they structure the cooperative or the group, whatever it is, that the enterprise that they are making, and to really support one another. So it takes nothing to like a picture, repost, things like that. So it's important as a community to support our own. It's very, very important, because we can all rise together like that and then in long term. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Eunice. I think the intervention by Tiffany and then by Jennifer about how there's so much opportunity online and in the digital space for those who can access it, because we also have to remember that it's not necessarily a universally accessible thing. I remember one of the collectives that we work with at Cal in Benin. conducted research that we're yet to publish, but they conducted a research on the challenges of employability and employment for particularly queer women in Benin, but also just generally in West Africa. And I think that challenge has a lot to do with, the bigger challenge, which is social acceptance. And so it's difficult to get a job in the more traditional places, because then those places, the conventional jobs, are not necessarily going to be the most welcoming. So as much as you want to try, you kind of also have to think about employment out of the box and think about an income and securing a future. So like sort of building wealth in addition to just paying bills and getting a paycheck. You want to think about all that out of the box. And so what you've said, Eunice, about ensuring that we support each other involves also some of the work that Mina was talking about, which is also supporting economically, or thinking about ways to support economically the community that she works with, that they work with. And so how do we do that? How do we do that kind of support and thinking about the future of work, and not just work, because the end goal for work is, at least in the way that I think about it, the way that people think about it for the most part, is you want to earn a living and you want an income, and not just a vocation, because you can do vocation without necessarily asking anyone for permission or about worrying about too many things, right? So earning an income, how do we think about coming together to support each other, because we know how difficult it is as women, but then more than that, as queer women, and then more than that, as queer women living in Africa, to get to the point where particularly LGBT youth in Africa and all women and young women in Africa feel safe, feel a level of safety going into their future, knowing that because the society doesn't necessarily accept them or welcome them or want them in a way that can secure their income, they can then rely on this other group of women who will support them. We have a long way to go with regards to that, but I do believe that there's lots of people who, if we use Tiffany and Jennifer's tip about collaboration, we can definitely do something that makes a significant impact on the lives of these young people. Thanks for that question to the person who asked. There's another question about regarding youth living in an oppressive and homophobic environment. What sort of advice would you give in terms of managing and dealing with their mental health? So whoever takes this question, of course, all of us are living in really oppressive and homophobic environments. So just generally speaking, but who wants to take this question? Mino, did you raise? Go ahead, Mino.
I think what I've come to learn is definitely the LGBT community, especially in the contexts such as ours, do face a lot of mental health issues. But mental health is something that we all need to treat just the way we treat our physical health. If you get your headache, you feel unwell, you will go to see a doctor about it. But I think it's been surrounded with such stigma and sort of this notion that having mental health challenges or struggling with your mental health is weakness, or it shows that you're something's wrong with you. And I think that's some of the ideas that we need to start doing away with. So dealing with your mental health, you should deal with it the same way you deal with your body. If your body feels ill, how do you go about that? I understand that in our context, even finding affirming mental health issues is difficult, because not all practitioners will be aware of how to kind of handle a person from our community, because some of the issues that we face are not exactly the same as those in the mainstream. But I think what has happened here, I think the mental health programs are kind of being scaled up quite a bit. And it's been identifying institutions that are willing to work with the LGBT community in terms of accessing mental health services and kind of taking them through issues of sensitivity, understanding what it means to be part of this community, understanding the aspects of identity and lived experiences of LGBT people. And these institutions are now working to provide mental health services to the LGBT community. I'm in therapy myself right now. It's something I'm not paying for. And that's another challenge because seeing a therapist is also not cheap. And most times it's not free. So even when you will want to see a therapist and you might know which one you're able to see that's safe, that's affirming, it also comes to the aspect of, can I afford it? So it's also a question of what kind of work are we doing to ensure that these services are accessible. As if I want an HIV test, I walk into a clinic and I'll be taken somewhere. I don't have to pay for it. It's a service just as free as any other that we can access in health institutions. Yeah, I think that's my take on that.
Thanks for that, Mino. Thanks for that. Just moving on quickly to the next two questions. Someone asked, Julianne asks, how can we further support LGBTQ plus specific of youth groups? Do we have someone who would like to take this question? Sure, go ahead, Mino. Thanks for that.
I feel similar to mainstream youth organizing. My personal opinion is, how do we support LGBT youth? I think it's empowering youth with the resources to actually be able to design and run their own programs. We see incidents of, for example, our Minister of Youth being a 50-year-old person, and then youth only being called to commemorate some booklet that has been done for the youth, or a lot of crap like that. But I think it's about empowering the youth with the resources to be able to design their own programs, to be able to run their own programs. We understand the experience that comes with with age and with people that have been doing this kind of work for so many years, but I think that needs to shift to more of a mentorship or a coaching or something, so that we're transferring those skills. We don't want a situation where this person leaves that slot and there's no one that can carry on that work because there was no skills transfer or no mentorship of some sort to empower the next person to be able to carry on this work. So I think moving those resources from where they are and actually putting them in the hands of the youth themselves, and particularly for LGBT youth, would be a good place to start. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Mino. I absolutely second that, and I think also when we're thinking about the question that was earlier addressed about the future of work. Part of that process of transferring those resources also and creating those opportunities also involves or includes all these organizations, regional, national, or institutes, creating some space within the work that they're doing, particularly for young people who are interested in them or in learning what they're doing and this and that. I know that we struggle a lot with resources in terms of financing the work that we do. So creating that kind of space, which ideally, someone would call perhaps like an internship program, or, like paid volunteership, or, all those kinds of fellowships or things like that. We don't necessarily do that a lot as organizations working in gender and sexual rights in Africa. And I think we can do it if we take it very seriously and allocate significant resources for that kind of work as well. So thanks for sharing that, Mino. We have one more question, which is by, I can't see this name properly, Chan Wei. I hope I'm saying that correct. Sorry if I butchered your name. Would you influence the policy to protect LGBTQ rights, or do you face any challenge to work with the government, and do you deal with it? I can answer part of these questions, but I'll repeat it just so the panelists can also have a think about if one of you might want to tackle a different. The question is, would you influence the policy to protect LGBTQ rights, or do you face any challenges to work with government, and do you deal with it? So I think for most national and regional organizations, and to a great extent also, which sort of the work that they do is informed by grassroots and local based organizations. Majority of the work we do is actually trying to influence or to shape policy. It's a very slow process, as all advocacy is very slow. And working with governments is very difficult, particularly governments that are our governments, which are very conservative for the most part. And so the way that we approach the work we do with regards to influencing policy is multifaceted, I would say. There's different directions that we can take and that we do take to tackle that policy issue. So as Mino mentioned, for example, they work in sexual and reproductive health rights, and there's very different things that go on under that category of work. At CAL as well, we do lots of bodily autonomy advocacy, which also includes sexual and reproductive health and rights work. And so you will definitely find us trying to influence policy at the Human Rights Council at the UN. And before the Coalition of African Lesbians observer status at the African Commission was revoked, we used to go and we would do a lot of work around promoting policy change with regards to women's bodies and letting women decide what they want to do with their bodies. So yes, we face very many challenges, as I've mentioned. For one, that the African Commission is the only regional human rights mechanism that we have in Africa. And so all states go there and all states engage on human rights issues on that platform. So for the organizations that NGOs, that is, which is non-governmental organizations that participate on that platform, they sort of get a place to share their ideas, a place to make demands, a place to question their governments and hold them to account on various human rights issues. And the only way to do that is if you have observer status. So if you don't have observer status, you cannot do that. And so CAL, Coalition of African Lesbians, one of the challenges we face is that we, for 1 minute, had the space, the platform to do that, and then it was taken from us because of the word lesbian in the name of the organization. So that's just one of the challenges. Mino had mentioned earlier security challenges as well. So there's that. And then how do you deal with it? Does anyone want to tackle any other parts of that question? How do you deal? Eunice, go ahead.
So I'm speaking in regards to, I guess, as an economist, the issue is for some countries where, let's say, it's not a crime to be queer, like ours, you find that there's no way to influence policy if there's only one cohort that is recognized. Like the umbrella in Rwanda is men who have sex with men, MSM. Yet the rainbow has different babies and different children. Why isn't everyone accounted for and acknowledged? So how are we going to change policy when there's only one group that is recognized, that is representative We don't even have data. On what basis are we going to argue? How do you deal with it? If you have the capacity, if you are an organization and you have funding, if you're an independent researcher, then the goal is to do advocacy that is based on data. Because otherwise, it's difficult to talk with a policymaker. It's difficult to talk with a decision maker when you don't have numbers to back up saying, and that comes with first changing the laws. Hence, it's necessary for, again, those who have access to platforms, to education, to really dig into either stats or data mining or data manipulation and law, to know how do I reform a law? What do I write? What do I get through parliament? So as different people are acknowledged, to decriminalize fairness, and also to be able to find funds that allow us to gather data. Otherwise, we almost have no grounds to speak, because they would overlook you quickly, So I think that's how you deal with it at your reach. How do you equip yourself with the tools to speak their language? That's how you would engage them. Yeah.
About Eunice, because the other thing to think about with regards to how do you deal with those challenges is precisely why we're talking about well-being, because then you face so much in the work that you're doing, and if your well-being is compromised, then you would quit, because it's quite a lot to deal with. And so one of the ways that we I suppose tackle those challenges is to ensure that we are properly equipped to take them on, because it always seems like there's infinite amounts of energy that those people who are trying to block what you're working towards, which is freedom, they always seem to have infinite amounts of energy. And so you can't give up. And the way that you do that is to make sure that you're not burnt out all the time, to make sure that the people that you work with aren't burnt out as well. So we don't have too much time, and I'm seeing more and more questions coming in. Thanks so much for the questions. I will take 2 more questions before we ask the last question of our panelists. I see someone asks, there's this, no, there's this question by Pablo, who says, recently we have seen how globally rights have been lost for LGBTI people. Do you think that we should do more advocacy on the streets? Should we have specific programs in schools? Would anyone like to take that question? I know it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we have different approaches to advocacy, and there's different ways that we could do the work that we're doing on gender and sexual rights, organizing and activism. And Pablo says that, makes an observation that is quite accurate, that there seems to have been a great loss of the rights of gender non-conforming people, and also LGBTI people generally speaking. So do you think that we should do more advocacy on the streets? I think it's a specific question. And should we have specific programs in schools? Do you have any takers on that, Eunice? And then Tiffany, go ahead.
So I don't think that it's either or. I think we should use all that we have. That means take it to the streets, take it to Twitter, take it to Instagram, but also have some people who are working with Parliament, have some people who are designing programs, have some people who are talking to policymakers, and some that are gathering the data. So I don't think that it's one group effort or one thing at a time. I think we all need to see what our strengths are individually, in our capacity, and focus on that in whatever capacity that you have, you know. So I don't think that it's just to take it to the streets, and I also don't think that it's like, I guess in Zambia or in other countries like South Sudan, I don't think that you can include that in a school program. The Ministry of Education won't allow you to, because it's a crime. So then what do? We have different people, while preserving their safety, because it's not safe to necessarily go to the streets, you know. So we all need to just combine our efforts together and also know what our strengths are, and then use that as a collective, but also in our different clusters. That's how I think we can get to the desired outcome. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Eunice. Tiffany?
I was just going to echo. I'll just cede the floor.
So there's a few people who've raised their hands. I'm sorry, for now I can't bring you to the stage, but if you have a particular question, please go ahead and ask the question in the chat box. There's one last question before we proceed. We have a few minutes. There is a prop by Fernando. There's a project called He for She that educates men about gender equality in a way. Oh, it disappeared. In a way of reducing prejudice. What's your opinion about that? Is there anything similar to racism for white people to participate in? I'm sorry. Is there a similar thing to face racism for white people to participate in? If so, what would be your opinion about it? I don't know whether you mean, Fernando, trainings on racial issues for white people, but I see Mina raising your hand. Would you like to take the question?
The he for she concept, I mean, it's okay. I get where it's coming from, but my issue with he for she programs always comes in to say, you teach people, you teach the men about all these things and about prejudice and everything, but what is it that the men are doing in society? That's a system that has benefited them for a million years. So what is it that they're doing besides just saying, oh, I'm sensitized, I'm gonna act better towards women or women's issues? But what is it that they're actually doing to ensure that this system that has protected them for all these years actually starts to change, to ensure that it's not only my personal attitude as a man that's, but that the system that I've been still benefiting from is also changing? The question speaks about the issues of racism also. The issue of race is just the same thing. You can teach people to be racially sensitive and to not discriminate based on race, but if I'm still enjoying privilege, for example, as a white person, and that's privilege that I've enjoyed for the longest time, what am I doing to make sure that that whole system changes to accommodate everybody? And that's the problem that I have with such kinds of projects. You sensitize a few people, but are those people actually doing or taking concrete steps to change the system that they have been benefiting from and that they will continue to benefit from if it doesn't change? Yeah.
Right, thanks for that, Mino. Yeah, I mean, this definitely also raises questions about just beyond campaigns like that. The approach is generally the same. Like when you think about how on the continent and in the countries where we work in, we have several other organizations that work on campaigns for, I don't know, for instance, clean water, for education, for this and that. And ideally they are all human rights organizations, but then the thing that tends to happen is that they then don't want to associate themselves with gender and sexual rights organizations. And it's not very clear what they're doing to support them, because they also are aware that in the societies that they're working in, there's a certain hierarchy that has been developed of like, oh, it is okay to do work on advocating for food and water because that's top priority, and then all other kinds of rights are sort of relegated to like the back burner, right? So those ones are not so important. So then they see themselves, those types of organizations see themselves as doing the things that are most important for their society, like that's the priority, when we all have an understanding as human rights activists and advocates that, you know, human rights are indivisible. You know, you can't come and say that these rights are better, those ones we can deal with later. You know, so when we're thinking about educating people on this and that, like, it also, for me, it makes me think about organizations that are supposed to be aware of the indivisibility of human rights, and yet it is not very clear that they are doing their part to ensure that all vulnerable or marginalized communities are experiencing or enjoying the same rights that they're fighting for a specific group of people in their communities. So, I mean, my thoughts about this is that it's a very dangerous approach, but I also am aware that it has its uses in some places. I agree with Mino with regards to the fact that it's not necessarily clear what happens once those people are sensitized, for example, or trained on this and the other. Where's the, like, sort of, can we meet halfway type of approach, if at all? Thanks for bringing that question to us, Fernando. I don't think we can properly address it in this forum. We have just a few minutes left, and I'd like to use those few minutes left to ask the final question of our panelists. One of the things that we were thinking about when we were discussing this topic was thinking about how the pandemic has affected your organization and the work that you do. What do you think about the future of feminist organizing, LGBTQIA plus organizing, and well-being on the continent? What, based on everything that you have experienced with regards to how the pandemic has shifted things, how does the future look like? Not just for your work, but also just for general organizing on the continent. I see Jennifer thinking. Jennifer, could you share with us?
Okay. I think from my end, I would say that now we have to start looking at ways to leverage on other platforms. Like, I know I've been saying using social media and doing things online and virtually, but aside from that, we also have to start, I think we've all mentioned this previously, we also have to start looking at ways to partner and come up with different programs or initiatives. So things like maybe having webinars where we discuss about LBQ issues, or we talk about coming up with advocacy programs that focuses on not just focuses on women with disabilities, female sex workers, also like LGBTQI women as well. We need to start doing that. We need to start working alongside other NGOs, working alongside allies, and also basically coming up with projects and programs that are surrounded around those topics. I think for us doing that now, we then amplify the works that people are trying to, we are all trying to put across as well. And I would also say, I think for me, that's where my mind or that's where my thinking is going to at the moment. But if I do have other answers, when my fellow experts are talking. But for now, that's what I can think of.
Right. And thanks for sharing that. And Tiffany, just as we're thinking about closing out the session, what do you think the future holds for feminist organizing and LGBTQI plus organizing based on how the pandemic has affected your work and our work in general?
I think what I've seen is that there's also a lot more space for a lot more actors. A lot of people have started thinking about how they can get involved in advocacy. I think one of the most powerful things that I saw during the pandemic was different people rallying to sort of like figure out like the way Jennifer was doing to get like resources to like queer like folks and stuff like that. So people seeing that they do have a place within advocacy, because historically advocacy had been taken up by like a lot of big names, and we all know this in all of our countries. There's those people who came first and they're the ones who were like the first gay person out, and 20 years later they're still the ones doing the work. I think this time has shown that there's a lot more space for a lot more actors, a lot more people, doing a lot more innovative things, right? Because I've seen people, like the way me and Jennifer keep talking about social media, but I've seen people start blogs, I've seen people start podcasts, I've seen people organize online for like different things. Like I saw a lot more actors within sort of like the protests, like the digital protests around what was happening in Ghana. People finding different ways to create spaces, be it like smaller physical spaces or bigger digital spaces. So for me, it's been a really sad, hard time, but it's also really exciting to know that a lot more people are getting involved in advocacy without it being advocacy, right? So like they just understand that they're there, they're in their communities, they're showing up, they're doing proper things. And that's very exciting for me. Yeah.
Sharing that, Tiffany. Eunice, what's your take about what the future holds for organizing?
Okay, I think the future calls for more strategic thinking and application in what we want to do. So we have to be more focused exactly on what we want to do, depending on the context, depending on what the focus is for the specific activist or community or organization. Second of all, I think that very necessary to as organizers, because I think that that's a gap that is still not yet filled in regards to having queer folks, part of the community who are lawyers or who are data analysts or who are researchers, so as to do the background work, because not all of us are going to be able to to organize on social media or have a community, but there's yet so much work that can be done on the side. So I think that it's necessary to have interdisciplinary abilities and skills as an organizer, and then to contextualize it to the work that we're doing and be more strategic. I think that personally, the weight is on the organizers to be more strategic themselves, while the community is obviously necessary to be mended together to provide the emotion for each other, and to just look beyond the era, because most of the community sometimes is in the rural areas. So now how do we also get to them? How do we also equip them with the necessary, how do the resources get to them? How do they become empowered economically and sustainably? They also need the resilience that those that are using Instagram are able to have. So I think it's necessary to class ourselves, build our capacities, and then be strategic in our action. That's what I think is the future.
Thanks so much, Eunice. I couldn't agree more. Mino, could you share your thoughts on what the future holds for sexual and gender rights organizing? Thank you.
I think maybe just taking a little bit of everything from what everyone has said. Health is wealth, right? And I think a lot of investment has been done in health services and issues to do with access, availability, and all that. But I think going forward, I think we need to adopt a mindset that the LGBT community is more than HIV, is more than STIs, is more than that package that's constantly being anything to do with LGBTI once the people want to associate it with HIV or STIs. I think we need to start approaching these issues from a humanity point of view. These are people that we are dealing with, and we need to approach that from that perspective. So in as much as health services are very important, I think we also need to start shifting our focus and our priorities. And I'm personally very passionate about mental health and well-being programs, about sustained livelihood, about economic strengthening initiatives. Because a lot of the times people have this perception that LGBT people are always people that are asking for a favor to be done for them, or to get free money, or to get a free job, or to get anything free just because someone is from the LGBT community. But I think that's also a message that goes back to our own community, that we, being a member of the LGBTI community, is not a disability. And we have to start developing ourselves. We have to start building our own capacity, because life is a competition. Someone won't say, because you're gay, I'm constantly going to be giving you free stuff. So we need to also start developing ourselves and ensuring that if I'm living in this society, I'm able to favorably compete without expecting someone to do me a favor just because I'm from a marginalized community. I mean, people from the LGBTI community are some of the most resilient and innovative people that I have seen, because despite the challenges, despite constantly being attacked with anything that someone can think of, I think we've found a way to exist and to thrive and to actually make something of ourselves. And I think that's the other issue, is that people will only respect LGBTI persons when they're seen to be successful, or when they're seen to have attained some level of status. But that's not how it should be. So, I mean, let's shift our focus to also kind of think of those things, developing ourselves, developing the people that we work for, but also taking care of our minds, because a sick mind would definitely lead to a sick body, and I think we don't want that. Yeah.
So much, Mino, and to all you wonderful, amazing women for those insights. I totally agree with what you're saying, Mino, about thinking about our lives in more diverse ways, thinking about our activism and our organizing in more diverse ways. Cal, that we have been talking about for a long time, and the ways that we approach our work is by understanding and accepting that the oppressions that we are constantly fighting against, and the activism that we're doing, which is against all these oppressions, are, you know, oppressions that are multiple and they're intersecting. So we can't possibly fight for example, decriminalization, when at the same time it is still not safe for women of any kind to be outside or to just be anywhere during the day, because there's kind of harassment or violence. And as we've seen, you know, this pandemic, how, you know, the violence against women rates have really gone much higher. We're not safe until all those oppressions are addressed. And so thinking about what Eunice said about different approaches and, you know, people taking care of this and the other, is the same way we think about gender and sexual rights organizing. Just because we have certain things down doesn't mean that the whole society or the communities or the places that we live in are going to be safe for us still. It just means that one thing has been taken care of. And so for me, a successful future of gender is one works in an intersectional way, recognizing that the oppressions that we're facing are related and they're intersecting. And so we cannot pick and choose what we're fighting against. We fight against all oppression. Thank you so much. Leave us at this point with 10 minutes left, just so that we can also get some rest as well and get ready to enjoy and participate in other sessions. Thanks to our wonderful audience for joining us. Our wonderful tech people who are supporting us over on YouTube and on here as well. Thank you so much. And thank you again to all the panelists. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Eunice. And thanks, Mino, for your. I appreciate you so much. And I look forward to talking to you some more much later and working together in the future. For anyone who might be interested in the audience, whether on Juno or YouTube, in working together with any of these women you see here or with me at the Coalition of African Lesbians, please do go ahead and look up Holla Africa, look at One Action Foundation, look up Eunice, who's doing her work, Eunice Ishimwe, who's doing her work as an independent development economist, who's a proud feminist, and Mino, who's doing her work in Lusaka with the Women Against, sorry, Mino, I'm sort of scrambled. I didn't forget. And with Mino, Women Action for Equality in Zambia, Lusaka. I'm still very excited that you all joined us. Please go ahead and visit the partner page that we have here at on the Juno platform, the Coalition of African Lesbians partner page, and have a look at all the resources that we've shared. Sign up to our newsletter and follow us on or to keep updated on the work that we're doing. Thank you all for your participation and for your wonderful questions. Thank you. I wish I could see all of you and send you all my appreciation in person. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.